We just saw some pretty seriously bad security in terms of a leaky API. So that is, we're seeing things like email addresses and passwords leaked via the API that gets hit when you drill down into a supercar. It gets attached to each one of the votes that we see here in this collection. The security ramifications of this go without saying, and the fix is probably also fairly obvious, but let's go through it anyway. I'm going to bring the emulator back onto the screen now, and I'm just going to go back to the home page of the app. We can see another request here. The app makes a request each time you navigate around. You may not normally build an app this way. It is a very communication heavy way of doing things. And one thing I would like to be really clear about is that apps designed to show security vulnerabilities like this often have other deficiencies as well. It's certainly not very efficient. I've now secured the API that gets hit when we load a car. So let's go and hit the McLaren again and see what happens. So the first thing is, what you see on the screen looks identical. No change here. We're still seeing the car loaded. We're still seeing the same votes, the same comments. The end user experience is identical. Let's go over to Fiddler and have a look at the request. Now have a look at what we see here. Look at our votes. What do we have? We have a comment and a first name. And that's exactly what we see here in the app. That's all we ever needed. We never needed the email address, certainly not the password. In fact, we never even needed the last name. If you don't need it, get rid of it. You cannot lose and cannot expose what you do not have or do not send. That is a fundamental tenet of security. But there's another advantage to this as well. Let's go back and have a look at Fiddler, and we'll scroll across a little bit and look at the response size. It's now 436 bytes. It was 718 bytes. We've just shaved a big whack of the response size off by dropping out content. That's a nice little ancillary benefit, and it's all the more reason to trim down the APIs. Get rid of all the non-essential stuff. Even if you don't think it poses a security risk, if you're not using it, get rid of it. In this case, it was only a few hundred bytes, but certainly there are many other cases where APIs return excessive data. So securing this risk was an easy one. And of course, it was immediately obvious when we saw that API in Fiddler and we saw the email address and we saw the password that something serious was wrong. All we had to do was proxy that traffic. But equally so, there was absolutely no indication whatsoever in the app itself that something insecure was going on in the background. And I really want to reiterate that in the context of what we've just seen. Sloppy security practices like this easily fall out of sight and out of mind when they're in an API behind a rich client app. I gave you that real-world example of Westfield at the start of this module, and now here's an example you can go and reproduce yourself by going and hitting that API on hackyourselffirst.troyhunt.com. So that's a very serious risk. An API that's easily discoverable that returns data it shouldn't. Let's now move on and have a look at how we can discover other APIs that pose potential security risks.